So welcome to Fans of the Forge. I'm here with Mareko.
That's me.
From Dragon's Breath Forge here in Connecticut. We're going to do a quick interview, cover some of his episodes, well, the two that you were on, and just kind of generally talk about forging and your style and everything. So
let's do it.
So we were introduced to you on Season 1, Episode 7.
Yes, true.
Where you competed with Jamie, who was also here.
Yeah.
And you guys were given a ball bearing.
Oh, Jesus.
To make a blade that had to be between 9 and 13 inches long, and it had to have a hollow grind, which you have never done at that time before, or dealt with a ball bearing. So what kind of were you thinking when you had to do all that?
So I think it was like 2.5 inches. It was a giant.
It was big.
It was a giant ball bearing, and that is a large, a large mass to try to heat up. Because it's so big, I didn't actually know if the forges were going to be able to do it. They did it, fortunately, but that's just such a huge time suck to even just start off with like cold steel straight in the forge and be like, cool.
Yeah,
hang out here for like half an hour now. But yeah, getting that, and then getting it worked down into material that you could then forge a knife out of. That was definitely a big part of the challenge. So, and then I had done some forging with 52-100, but when you're starting with a ball bearing, you're starting with something that's already hardened. So then you have to kind of like reverse engineer the material in a way to then make it something that you can actually use for a knife.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, not too much really happened. I mean, yeah, you found some cracks while you were grinding. You know, that's kind of no big deal.
It's kind of standard now.
It's kind of standard. You just try to grind right through them. So round 2, you chose Marek for handle material. Again, it's just some grinding. The big drama for you was that the drill bit broke.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to
and I didn't swear when they went to commercial. I was like, beep, beep, beep. Yeah. I didn't swear at that point, but I did later. Sorry, to back up a little bit, I thought you were just asking about the ball bearing, but you're kind of asking about the whole round of the forging and the grinding. So to back up just a little bit, yeah, doing the hollow grind, that was nerve-wracking just because I freehand grind, and a lot of people that do the hollow grind, they do it using some sort of work rest and something. And so to learn how to do something and do it all in a competition setting was super nerve-wracking. My knife, actually, there's a part of the show where the judges are looking at Adam's work, and they're like, "Oh, look at the size of that thing." They were actually talking about my knife, because originally my knife was almost 13 inches long.
Yeah.
It was a giant, like Jason Knight style, like or recurve chopper kind of knife. And then that's after doing my thermal cycling, and I found some of those cracks, and fortunately I had it super long, and I did that intentionally because I thought if anything goes wrong with it, it's going to happen farther out of the tip, so I can then scoot it down. I was just over 9 inches. I think it was like 9 1/8 or 9 1/4.
Oh, really?
So I had to shrink it up quite a bit. But it was a giant beast of a blade. I actually have kind of a reproduction of that knife here. I'll show you guys afterwards what it was supposed to look like. But yeah, and then getting the grind in there, it was actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So fortunately, that wasn't too much of an issue. And then, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the judges said it came out really well. They said they really liked the hollow grind that you did on it.
Yeah.
So for not having done it before, I mean, it came out pretty well. So
yeah, that's right. Dave wanted it to be a little bit taller.
Yes.
But considering, like, I was just trying to meet the parameters.
Right.
And that's obviously, as you watch the show, like, that's the thing that really bites people in the ass. I just actually watched JD's episode, and just missing that one piece of metal on top of being underneath length, like, you know, you gotta draw the line somewhere. And so I was trying to make sure at least I met that, because as you saw going into the second round, I pretty much ground it all back out flat again, and then went back and re-hollow ground it again, because it was just so thick. And like, you know, Jay Nielsen loves saying, you know, forge thick, grind thin.
Yeah.
And so it's, if it's too thick and you don't have the right belts to do the work, it can be kind of a pain. But fortunately, they did have some good belts on set. So
it worked out. So during the testing, the ice block chop, were you kind of worried about that at all? Seeing that, okay, they're going to be hacking my blade into this block of ice.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've never done that, but I know that ice is super hard material, basically. And they did tell it, at least in the first couple seasons, they only, for the second round, when they did the actual testing, they only told you one part of the testing. Because they'd say, like, you're going to do an ice chop. And then a specially designed edge retention tester. And like, what the hell does that mean? So now they tell you everything, especially in, like, the fourth and fifth seasons. But, yeah, so my big concern with doing the ice chop was making sure that I ground the blade to have a robust enough geometry to withstand that kind of force and to slam into something that hard.
Yeah.
So it was probably, my edge geometry was pretty thick. It was probably about 40 or 50 thousandths of an inch at the cutting edge, which is just under a 16th of an inch. And but I just wanted to make sure that nothing blew out. Yeah. Because that would obviously be completely devastating and send you down the drain pretty quick.
So you did well. You held no issues with the cracks. Was it Maxon's that broke?
Yeah.
His just broke. Right. That was the first hit too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. So the way they edited the show, I think it actually happened on the second hit, but. You know, they cut away. They start with Jay hitting, and then they cut away to us going, "Ooh, oh my god!" Yeah. And so they actually get. I think it's on the fourth hit.
Okay, because I noticed that when Jay like walked away, they showed that ice block. It was beat up. I was like, that wasn't the first. It couldn't have been the first hit because it was already chunks missing out of that block. But it sucked to see that go.
Oh, totally brutal.
Yeah.
Well, and they also they went straight from the edge or from the ice chopping to the other test. But the way they shared that narrative for that episode, they did all the ice block chopping first, and then they went and did everything else.
Yeah.
But I guess they didn't really have to go on to everything else because Maxon's blade broke. Yeah. So, but they did actually do more testing. It's interesting to go back and watch the episode, especially the ones that I've been on, and be like, I don't know why they made that call to cut out all this stuff, but like they could have done a lot more. Like I said, originally my blade I had forged out was like almost 13 inches long. Yeah. And they didn't show
do any of that. No.
Which is too bad. It was a cool looking knife.
Yeah, because I think what they did show Adams being super long. Yeah. And then he chopped that out, but then it was still really
he took it
long.
From he took the extra off the wrong end.
Right. Yeah, they didn't show any of the other tests other than ice chop.
Yeah.
So round 3, you guys have to go home. You have to make a Roman gladius. Right. Were you amped up to make something like that?
I was super nervous because my forge at home is only 11 inches long, but that's neither here nor there, because normally, actually, the forge that we have here at Dragon's Breath Forge is about the same, because you only want to really heat up the area that you're going to
be working. Yeah,
exactly. But my heat treating kiln was not as long. And so I had to like do it at a weird angle, and it's just super awkward. And so the concern was getting an even heat along the whole blade. I did do that, and heat treating everything went fine, but I think. Am I getting ahead of myself? Should I talk about how to build?
No, because only the notes I really have is you made a 680 layer Damascus billet for that.
Yeah.
And it's really, day 1, that was all they showed. Day 2, you forged a rough shape, started grinding. Right. And did a quench, started handle construction. They skipped the day 4, you're still working on handle. And then day 5, you're just kind of
like... Oh, yeah. The handle. So I think the handle is definitely what ultimately, like I said, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but it was a pretty intense build. Overall, I think there were 33 individual pieces in that entire handle. So it was complete takedown construction. So that means there are all kinds of indexing pins that are in there as well to help make sure everything lines up in place. Right. It's, again, the first time I'd ever done that. So I'm learning how to do it and doing it all at the same time, which is why it took like 2.5 days to build. Yeah. And by the end of let's say the middle of the third day, I was still working on that handle. Fortunately, the blade and everything was all right. So it was just a matter of finishing out that handle. It was super stressful. The last little part that helps hold all the handle together is essentially a bolt, a nut that tightens up from the pommel of the handle. Yeah. So I made a little spike one out of Damascus. But then turning, like I don't have a lathe, so I had chucked it into a drill press and was using files and other stuff to like trying to cut it down. But it was super stressful. And the one thing I think if I were to do it again, it probably would have been fine if I had glued it.
But,
But we find out.
something during the testing. So the first step was slice test. You had to cut through branches and vines, sugar canes.
Yeah.
Yours is very light, very sharp. Handle felt secure.
Was like an inch and a half, 2 inches in front of the door.
Yeah, Doug was very pleased with it.
Yeah.
Then the kill test went up against a ballistics dummy. He had some deep cuts, plenty of kill shots. Strength test.
The kill shot to the throat.
Yeah.
When he did that, I heard it go into the bone. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
The tip's gonna come out broken.
Oh yeah.
Fortunately, it didn't. But
he's like, oh, it goes all the way to the spine.
Oh,
yeah.
It's like, no.
And then they pull out this crazy rig for this strength test to swing it into another gladius that they made.
Yeah.
But your edge held up and had it was a strong blade. He said so. They don't show this too often. They may make you guys go out while they go in their little deliberation room.
Right.
So, they make a point to say, well, the handle actually bent a little bit, but versus Jamie, who had a slight bend when he brought it,
right,
and his blade, and then Doug had an issue with his handle rolling,
right, because of how round it was,
right, during the vine chop.
Yeah,
there was some edge damage, but they like this Damascus pattern, and then they say, well, Jamie wins, and that surprised me because I was like, well. He just has his handle bent. That's all. I mean, they had these other points against Jamie's, but
right.
I was a little surprised that you got the boot instead of him for that. But.
Yeah, my wife actually thought I had lied to her about losing.
Yeah,
I was like, no, I promise I lost. As much as I hate to say it, and then dun dun dun. Like we were literally watching the episode. She thought I was actually going to win because of the way they the way they told the story.
Yeah.
The whole episode was like building me up to be the winner, and then
that was it.
Which is brutal. And I think I mulled all over it for a while myself because I was like, what the hell happened? Like, it seemed like it was doing really great. And it did bend off just the slightest, like literally 1 or 2 degrees, like the very slightest little thing. And when they show the shot in the episode, it's Doug looking at the handle edge on, but it's actually the bend was the other way. But I think ultimately it came down to which is the easier thing to fix. To fix the handle, even though it was a takedown construction, traditionally they didn't do a takedown construction. So you'd have to take that whole handle apart to fix that material and put it all back together. Versus Jamie's, a bend in the blade, while it might not have been the best to present it that way, it is a fixable issue. And the way the edge rolled, that just kind of really indicates that he took it to too acute of an angle when he sharpened it instead of giving it, again, kind of a more robust edge. And that way it would have withstood kind of the toughness test.
Right.
But so I think it came down to they both look great. They both performed well. Which one is more of a pain in the ass to fix versus the other? And mine, I think, ultimately ended up being the one that was going to have a bigger pain.
So, but...
You seem really sad about that. I appreciate it.
I was like, hey, this isn't right.
Bummed out.
But anyway, so you get brought back by Doug because of that weapon, the Gladius that you made, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. So was that kind of humbling? Be like, oh, this is awesome.
For sure. So after the show, recording the first episode with the Gladius, I kept in touch with Doug, and we talked from time, and he's just like, that Gladius, I can't get over that Gladius, and he loved it. And so when they did that episode, it was awesome to see that he was still thinking of me in that episode, and how much he really liked my work. Even just outside of that, he'd seen a lot of my other stuff, and he's like, I really want you to come back and kind of get an opportunity to redeem yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that was season 4, so he'd seen a lot of other blades come through. But, he picked yours to come back, so that was really neat. You guys were given some high carbon round stock, and you had to pull a piece of salvage steel, and you went for a street sign.
Right.
So why did you go with the street sign?
It seemed like, especially with the carbon steel, it seemed like the easiest thing for my background and experience. I knew that I could forge that round stock down into flat stock, and then restack it back up. And essentially, I'm making a Damascus billet, which is what I do like all day long.
Okay.
So it was very. I think if you're gonna do this show, you gotta stay within kind of like your lane. And from which I didn't do the first episode, first season, in the first season, especially with that takedown handle construction. Didn't have really obviously a choice with the hollow grind, but that takedown construction, I probably should not have done that. I probably should have kept it. It's still nice, but a little bit simpler.
Yeah.
So doing choosing the road sign was definitely for me the best way to just use the skills and knowledge that I already have. One thing I didn't take into consideration, though, is all the prep time that it was going to take to do that. And I didn't actually start forging my Damascus billet until an hour and a half into the first round.
Yeah.
So I forged that together, welded it up, and then forged a bar out of that. It's funny because my plan was to make a chef's knife, one that was designed to withstand like chopping into stuff. And they did tell us that we were going to be doing an antler chop and an apple slice. So I was like, okay, fine. I can just tailor the geometry of the cutting edge to withstand cutting into an antler.
Right.
But I had some issues spreading the material out to get the height or the heel height that I wanted, the depth of the blade on the chef's knife. So I ended up forging out and it had to be I think it was like 12 to 14 inches long or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. My memory is
it's pretty good. Yeah, and overall max was 22 inches.
Right.
For the whole weapon.
And then, so I ended up forging out this kind of weird kind of slight like elven slicing, like short sword almost, because it was like 14 inches long.
Yeah.
And so, but they kept calling it a chef's knife throughout the whole episode. And I got all kinds of emails. People were like, "I loved your chef's knife." I was like, "That was a fucking chef's knife. It was a fighting knife." But I appreciate it.
Yeah. For judging, they just said a slight warp in the blade, but it looked great, and Doug felt like a proud papa.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, the warp. That's actually, I think Josh also had a warp in his blade, and the first thing both of us did in the second round was to work on getting those warps out. Yeah. And we both did like a torch along the back, and then I was prying on it in the vise. It was kind of a sketchy thing to do. I mean, anytime you're prying on the knife in the vise, they're like, oh, everybody's like waiting on the edge of the seat for the thing just pop and break, which definitely has happened. But I was like, I feel pretty comfortable with what I'm doing. If I lose, I'm like, whatever.
It happens.
It's like, go out and flames diving down to the ground. But anyway, yeah.
You had to incorporate at least 3 handle materials in the handle design. Used pine cone and cardboard. Didn't really show a lot of airtime for you during that round.
Yeah.
It seemed, I guess, pretty simple for you to just knock
it was pretty
out.
straightforward. Yeah, I kept it simple.
For strength test, they had the antler chop.
Oh, Jesus.
They said it was super light for its size. It suffered a little bit of edge deformation, but that was that. And for the sharpness test, Dave said it maybe cut through 10 apples. I don't know. He just said that, even though it cut through the 10 apples.
He said maybe cut? I'll have to go back and watch
10 apples.
It was when he was going to go do this. He's like, maybe it'll cut through 10 apples.
Oh. But Jason said, I went through all 10 like a lightsaber.
Yeah.
And so for round 3, you had to make
the Ida.
The Ida. So another long weapon.
Yeah.
At this point, were you ready for another long weapon to make?
I had anticipated that.
Okay.
And I had reached out actually to a gentleman I first started knife making under, who I knew had a 3-foot long heat treating kiln. Mm-hmm. So I got a hold of him before I even flew out, and I was like, there's a potential. I may be coming back to come do some filming at the shop. And he's like, yeah, feel free to come by and pick it up. So if it wasn't for that, I probably still could have heat treated it out of my normal kiln, but it would have been really pushing because it's actually longer than the Gladius.
Yes.
That would have been rough. But fortunately, he was happy to let me borrow it. So I don't know what else you got for that.
It had to be between 22 and 26 inches, double edge. So you went for mosaic steel.
Yeah.
Which was cool, and a full integral blade.
Yeah.
Were we just kind of going for just high quality construction when you went? Say, I'm going to go with mosaic for that, or just.
I wanted it to look good, but I also wanted it to be strong.
Yeah.
Typically, especially when I do a mosaic pattern for my chef's knives, it's a tiled mosaic. Mosaic refers to like the very intricate pattern that ends up being revealed on the blade. So there are a lot of different approaches, and so I tried to use one that was kind of the strongest overall, and that was essentially laddering the mosaic bar, and so what you're getting is a partial cross section, and so it's still one solid piece after you forge it all out the rest of the way. But yeah, I just wanted to be good and strong, but also aesthetically
really,
for sure.
Give it a little edge there. Day 3 heat treat, good quench, fit and finish, etching, handle. So they didn't show like a lot for you, which is normally pretty good. You come in to do the kill test on a ballistics dummy. It was sharp, it broke some ribs, lacerates deep, balance is good, it will kill. It was nice to see Doug once again just taking it and going to town on a dummy.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. It was cool to watch it be put to work right there in the middle of
and
medieval
perform well. Sharpness test, 3 strikes through a web of ropes. It was fast and light. Overall cut, but was not as successful as Josh.
So through everything I was reading before, as I was prepping, like flying back essentially home to do the competing, essentially the Ida sword was a short sword that was kind of the precursor to a machete. So I was like, okay. And it's from Africa, and so I was like, okay, they're going to be cutting vegetation. That's the only thing that made sense. And so I designed the geometry and to be able to cut through like sugar cane and vine and stuff like that, kind of essentially like the first episode I was on. But they didn't do that. They did hemp rope. And hemp rope, you kind of need a very fine edge geometry, which Josh did have, and obviously it just blasted through every single rope it cut. But then it turned around and that bit him in the ass on the last test, which was super rough to see. He made an awesome sword.
So his strength test, chop into femurs.
And when I was going home, I was like, "There's no fucking way they're going from chopping on antlers to cutting through a leather boot or something like that." Like, they gotta up it, and the only thing bigger than that is chopping through femurs. So I was like, I gotta do everything I can to heat treat this and grind it and sharpen it in a way that it can withstand that worst. Because the last thing you want is the sword coming in contact with something like that, and it just like getting bent over or completely breaking in half, which obviously has happened. And so I did everything I could, and it did surprisingly well.
It picked up a slight bend, but the edges held up. And you pulled out the win and beat Josh. So
by the skin of my teeth.
Do you have a Damascus pattern you've been working on lately? Anything new?
Yeah, so it's on my Instagram, and it's I think I've been calling it Briar Patch. And essentially, it's a new take on a very traditional as in Damascus is only people have been recreating pattern well as seal for like the last 50 years. So, but it's a take on the basket weave that really looks like the pattern weaves over and under and around each other. And I've been able to do that with this new pattern, and it looks super awesome.
Nice.
Actually, I got the blade out in the shop. Okay. I'll show you guys.
Cool.
But it looks really good, and it came together nicely, and so, yeah.
When you start a new pattern, new Damascus pattern, is there a first step for determining what you think the end result will look like?
I draw it all out.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can do this, but I'll be grinding a blade or grocery shopping, and then I'll see this thing in my mind's eye. I'm like, well, I got to draw it. And so I'll stop whatever I'm doing if I can. I always carry something on me to draw with or write with, just in case, so I can do that. And then I go home and I reverse engineer it. And so I identify different elements of the pattern and figure out what previous step had to happen for it to get there, and just essentially work backwards until I have a starting point, and then from there I work forward. And most all the time, as long as I've forged things the proper way, pattern comes out exactly how it's supposed to, which is
awesome.
Bonkers sometimes. It's weird.
Do you have a favorite non-kitchen knife you like to make?
Yeah, so I make these little kind of like bush knives.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think when I did one last. I think it was like last summer. But it's just a blacksmith knife essentially. And it's just rough forged. It's got an upset like choil, which is the back of the heel of the knife. So it kind of acts as a soft place for your finger to rest against.
Right.
But it's just like a 4 or 5 inch knife. And just pretty much forge your shape and just a little bit of grinding to sharpen it.
Okay.
And yeah,
All right.
that's a fun little one. It's good forging practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Was there anything else? No?
The people off camera?
The people have spoken. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
For sure.
See your work. Can't wait to see what you come up with, especially those other Damascus patterns that you're thinking of. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.